Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In this video, I will ask you about old poem. Indonesia is a large nation with a vast territory. As a big nation, of course, Indonesia has diverse cultural treasures in each region. One form of Indonesian literature that was created in the past was folk poetry. Folk poetry is the nation's heritage in the form of poetry, rhymes, and gurindam, which have moral, religious, and ethical value. Old poetry was usually based on by word of mouth, and usually the author was not known. Old poetry looks rigid because of rules such as the number of words in each line, the number of lines is a stanza, and also repetition of words, which can be at the beginning or at the end of a poem, or what is known as rhyme, by always instilling a form of critical thinking about the difference that exists. We also indirectly always instill an attitude or of mutual respect between culture that exists in Indonesia. Gurindam or rhymes sometimes contain social criticism, which in the end hopes that someone who has heard and read social criticism from rhymes and gurindam can change his attitude and behavior. Humility in accepting social criticism is reflection of attitude and mutual respect and respect. Pantun is a type of old poetry with rhymes and is bound. Syair is an old poem that tells a long story. Gurindam is similar to rhymes and poetry that were once brought by Hindu writers. If we look closely at the pantun, syair, and gurindam, all three are all types of poetry. Pantun is not just a composition of words that contain rhyme and rhythm, but also has a series of beautiful words to describe warmth, such as love, affection, and longing for the speaker's revenge. In addition, the pantun also contains creative and critical ideas and is dense in meaning. Pantun has certain characteristics as follows. First, each stanza consists of 4 lines. Second, each line consists of 8 to 12 syllables. Third, the end rhyme of each line is AB. The first and second lines are samples. The third and fourth lines are contents. Step to make pantun. First, understand the characteristic of pantun. The first thing that needs to be done is to understand the structure and rules of making rhymes. Second, determine the theme. The next step is to determine the desired theme. Third, write content. Fourth, determine sampling poetry is a story that contains myth, history, or religious teachings. However, during its development in Southeast Asia, poetry underwent change so that poetry became distinctly Malay. Poetry has 4 characteristics, namely each stanza consists of 4 lines. Each line usually has 8 until 14 syllables. The rhyme is a, and the language is figurative. All lines are content. Types of poetry or syair. First, romantic poem. This is the first type of poetry and many readers enjoy it. The content are about romance, which is generally found in consolation stories, hikayat, or even in folklore. Second, Panji poetry. Panji type poetry is solace poetry. This usually contains stories of adventure and war. Even in the banner poem, there is also a love story. Third, historical poetry. This type of poetry is poetry based on historical event. When the thinkers read it, most of it is about war. For figurative poetry, what is conveyed in this type of poetry is allegory. This poem is also called animal and flower poetry. The content of this poem is a satire of an event. 5 is religious poetry. The type of religious poetry is the most important poetry, where this poem is divided into 4 in the form of Sufi poetry. Poetry about Islamic history, poetry of advice, and poetry of the story of the Prophet. How to conclude a message in poetry? First, read the whole of the poem. Second, observe the translate sentence. Third, combine the meaning of sentence to sentence. And the last is conclude the poem with a good message. Gurindam. Gurindam is a type of poetry that combines rhyme and proverb. Gurindam feature verse consists of 2 lines. The rhyme is AA, relating to the teaching of ethics and advice. For the first line condition, the second line is the result. Step to conclude the content of Gurindam. First, read the content of the Gurindam carefully. B. Pay attention to the words in each line. C. Make sense of the words contained in each array by interpreting the words. The content of Gurindam will be easily analyzed and conclude. Pantun, syair, and Gurindam are variations of old poetry and Indonesian literary works. Nevertheless, there are some difference between pantun, syair, and gurindam. Pantun is not just a composition of words that contain rhyme and rhythm, but also has a series of beautiful words to describe warmth, such as love, affection, and longing for the speaker's revenge. In addition, the pantun also contains creative and critical ideas and is dense in meaning, while poetry is a story that contains myth, history, or religious teaching. However, during its development in Southeast Asia, poetry underwent change so that poetry became distinctly Malay. Meanwhile, Gurindam is a poem consisting of 2 lines and contain advice or tips. There are 6 steps that can be taken in paraphrasing. First, read the whole text. Second, determine the main idea of the discourses. Third, determine the story that will be the variation. 4. Arranging main idea without changing the meaning. 5. Refine the main idea. 6. From the discourse as you wish. Okay, thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.